All right. What's up, Investor Central? What I want to do today was go over our back testing like we usually do every month. What I've got for you here are all of our STAX AI prints since the end of October. So if you'll notice the ending being October 23rd, 2023, the options that have been called out, the option prices. And what I've done is I've gone back to double check what the highs of those option prints were, just to get an idea of where we stand now. Now you'll notice there's a lot of different colors in here because what I'm doing is there's always an initial check, and that's what this first column's for, seeing if it's a win or a miss. Then what I'll do on the right side is as I update these options prints, because a lot of these are for much, much later in the year, much, much later in next year even. And so what I'm doing here is double checking to see what those option prints have gone up to, what the percentage return on those happen to be, and calculating those for you. And as you can see, we've got a pretty solid hit rate. In terms of October, there were no misses. In terms of November, we did initially have a miss in Nvidia and Apple, which eventually turned out to be wins. And you'll also notice on the right side as well, a lot of these are getting some pretty awesome returns. You got anywhere from 5% to 1100% plus for some of these big winners. On the left, if you notice, some of these I've taken the expiration dates just to show that those have actually already expired. And let's take a quick look here. November, you'll notice there's only one real miss out of them, a 3% loss on PDD. When you take a look at that, ultimately that was where the highs ended up back up at after the initial print. Keep in mind though, a lot of these do have potential bigger losses, may have gone down further. What I'm doing here is I'm checking to see what the highs of those option prints are. Obviously it doesn't mean that these people are getting out at the top, but these are the potential returns for these option prints along the way. Take a look here at December. What we've got here is we've got one main miss here in Apple, but they do have till the end of 2024. That one so far is, still sitting at a negative 26% return. But throughout that month, we still have some pretty high returns, such as our TSM here was almost at a 10x return. You got OKTA, you got XBI. Oh, I should double check on this OKTA. Let's do that real quick. And take a quick look here. I'll update that for us right now. What I'm doing is I'm going through and checking what the highs of. So for example, we'll take a look at OKTA from December 7th till now. Let's take a quick look. December 7th. So all the way back here, we're going to take the highs, and you'll notice the highs, they just jumped up today. That's why I noticed I hadn't updated that one just yet. So we'll go ahead and we'll update that to $12. And you'll notice that updated return is now much, much higher. The most recent prints I'm updating in purple. So that's what you'll notice and what you're looking for. Those are the most recent updates. I also have the highs up through 1227 in blue. Orange is up through 2/2. Light blue here is through the 16th. And right now the purple, actually, I'll just update that to today, the 29th. Well, let's see there. So obviously with that OKTA being updated, you'll see that's a 400% return on that one. They got in at $2.30 here, which is a spot price of the option print. They got 5,000 of those. And if they're still in that, right, look at this. They've gotten up until January of 2025. They're looking at some pretty nice returns there. January updated as well. We had a couple of these. I did not get a chance to necessarily update these completely before they expired, but what you'll notice here, the price that they're, the strike that they're buying. So for example, SPY at 470, the option print on this one, I did an update here. Option or the SPY itself went up to 470, 493. So what that means is there's an inherent value of $4.93. I just put it at 420 here for that one as the expiration. Just because with options we can understand there's going to be a little bit of it in terms of the intrinsic versus extrinsic values, time value, etc. NVIDIA, you'll notice here, nice return. This one was only for January the 12th. They purchased NVIDIA with NVIDIA only being at 513. This was before earnings and all that. They purchased each option at 25. That one did go up to 33.50. QQQ, etc. So you'll see there's a couple of these ones that have expired, but the majority of what our STAX AI is actually showing is generally going to be long term. 2025, 2026, you'll see a lot of those prints out here for much, much later. Keep in mind too, these are always going to be high premiums. So they're spending $1 million or more. And what we're looking for are extremely high expected targets. So their strikes are being purchased for very, very far out of the money. And ultimately these tend to raise a red flag for us. Our STAX AI does a great job of selecting these out of out of the bunch, out of all the data that's being shown in the option pools and the dark pools. These are the ones that our software is picking out for us to focus a little bit more on. Let's continue down here though. What I did want to make sure we go over is our February prints. Our February prints from the 2nd to the 26th. We have about 19 of these that have shown up. And keep in mind too, there's only a few of them that have actually expired. The majority of them you'll notice here are all for 2025, 2026. So keep in mind, even if it might be a miss right now, these ones very likely can still go up. You'll notice here, actually, I do have one of these. Pinterest here was a very short-term contract, decent amount of money being spent. And even though it did go up by about 8% here, I do have it, with a W with a cross out through it. The reason being that ultimately Pinterest, this was, expected to be a earnings type of play. Pinterest ended up not getting that and ended up dropping afterwards. So this, if you did not get out before earnings, this very likely became a loser actually. So, I'll make sure that you see that I have it calculated within our percentages and our hit rate as well in a moment. With Google, Meta, APO, Shopify here as well has dropped a little bit, but keep in mind too, they have until the middle of next year. So they do have quite a bit of some time. So I'm not locking those in as necessarily a loss. The one that I would just say, take this one with a grain of salt. These short-term contracts tend to be a bit more of a gamble when you consider it. As much as our AI is shouting them out, still make sure that you're careful with your risk management and consider what these returns happen to be. The only put that we've seen on our STAX AI was this Tesla put back on the 5th, expired on the 9th for 200, which was technically in the money at the moment, right? 183.97 was where it went. And it did drop to 177. So there was some intrinsic value to it. Keep in mind these are expired, so I don't have a chance to go back and check what their current prices actually are. If somebody does have a way for me to check those expired prints, please let me know. I'm more than happy to try and get those exact values for us to be more accurate on our analysis here. So with that being said, one quick thing too, I will mention we do have an update coming up. We've been working on back testing that, working on going through the data of it. And it was actually shouted out by our CEO and our founder, Chemo, that these Intel calls technically were a sell. So if you were to consider these calls to be a sell, this one would technically be a win because it's actually playing the downside of that, not the upside. When we do have our update, these things will be more clear. We'll be able to understand if we're supposed to be taking the buy side or the sell side, what the actual sentiment of these purchases happen to be. Keep that in mind. And this is one of our biggest purchases when you look at it, $23.21 million on Intel calls. But if that's a sell, it definitely changes the direction of it. In addition, I will point out there's a couple of these you'll notice I have in gray. Okay, for example, the Tesla one, I wanted to make sure that I get accurate values. So that one, if somebody has a way for me to update that. Google here, only 5%, so I consider that a very small win. I don't like putting that completely in green at this point for that. And same with these Shopify ones. Shopify did have earnings right after this, dropped a little bit, and keep in mind it still has a lot of time to make that up. So, I'm not locking that in as a loss or anything either. But as you can see, we've got some pretty solid returns even for February. If you scroll a little bit further down, you'll notice our February hit rate here. We do have what I calculated 17 out of our 19 because we'll count this one as the win. Meta ended up becoming a win over here. 17 out of our 19. If you want to count Pinterest as a loss here, we're looking at 16 out of 19, which is a 84.2% hit rate. On average for February, this is definitely a little bit lower than the previous months, but 28.79. I want you to keep in mind, though, the current month that we're in that I'm doing back testing for tends to be a bit lower. For example, if you look back on our previous months of back testing, when we did it back in December, etc., our high average was only, I think, in the 80s to 90%. All right. So the hit rate here overall, we've got 55 out of 61 for all of our STAX AI prints so far. And actually the high average now, with everything being added together, divided by all the total prints, we're averaging 108% in terms of the returns. Now, keep in mind, I want you guys to be extremely clear about this. There is no guarantee that any of these you get out right at the top. So even if you're considering that you're getting only, 2/3 of this, et cetera, you're still looking at some pretty hefty returns compared to the S&P 500, which is ultimately our gauge and where we're comparing to. If you can beat the market and what the S&P 500 is doing, you usually are doing pretty well for yourself. And what STAX AI here is doing is it's simply helping us direct our eyes toward the more important prints, the more important dark pool purchases of these options. Because like we say, there's always somebody that knows something. And generally, we don't happen to be in those circles. So having this type of software on our side really does make a difference. You can ignore this. This was my previous February calculation, 7 out of 8. Right now, if you take a look at each of our months total, October was a full 6 out of 6, 100% hit. But keep in mind that was only from the last week of October. And as keep in mind too, as time goes on, a lot of these rates may go up because if they do continue with the amount of time that they purchased, end up becoming a hit, these numbers will simply bump up. Total hit rate, 90%. Highs on average, 108. Again, if you guys have questions about these, if you're unsure about how STAX works, please send us a message over at help@investorcentralclub.com. And what we can do is make sure we answer those questions for you. Again, this is Eric here with STAX AI with Investor Central Club. Happy to do these back tests for you. Keep in mind, we'll be posting all these receipts on YouTube, on our Discord for you guys to see. So as time goes on, you can see how powerful of a software that this is. All right, well, that's all I've got for you today. This is Eric signing out. I'll see you guys in the next one.